From now on, we will begin the FY 2023, a seminar on energy security and critical minerals organized by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, MOFA of Japan. I'm Nishimura, Director, Resource Security Division, MOFA. I will serve as a moderator. Today, we will have face-to-face discussions with the panelists, but the seminar is being delivered online. Thank you very much for registering and participating online. First, on behalf of the MOFA, Mr. Taketani Atsushi, Deputy Director General of Economic Affairs Bureau, will give an opening address. The floor is yours. Thank you for the introduction. I am Taketani, Deputy Director General of the Economic Affairs Bureau of MOFA. Panelists and online attendees, thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. I would like to extend my heartfelt appreciation on behalf of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs. I would like to make opening remarks. Asia Energy Security Seminar is held annually by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan to promote understanding of Japan's effort in energy security and the need for international cooperation. This year's seminar will focus on key minerals essential for the clean energy transition. I would like to talk about the situation about important minerals. The International Energy Agency, IEA, and International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, that we have present today, have indicated that in order to achieve the Paris Agreement's goal of limiting global temperature rise to within 1.5 degrees Celsius and achieving the net zero carbon dioxide emissions from the energy sector by 2050, renewable energy capacity must triple by 2030. In light of these findings, about 120 countries agreed at COP28 last October to triple the world's installed capacity for renewable energy and double the global average rate of improvement in energy efficiency by 2030. The world is now accelerating the transition from fossil fuels to clean energy in order to achieve net zero emissions. Critical minerals are essential to manufacture clean energy technology-based products. For example, cobalt, nickel, and rare earth are used in electric vehicle batteries and wind turbine motors. Demand for these minerals is expected to increase rapidly in the future as we transition to clean energy. However, the production, refining, and processing of key minerals are still heavily dependent on specific countries and regions. Therefore, securing a stable supply of these mineral resources is an important issue in the energy transition, and the international community is increasingly interested in this. The global expansion of demand for important minerals offers great economic opportunities for resource-rich countries, but at the same time, the development of mineral resources places a high burden on the environment. Therefore, it is also important for consuming and resource-rich countries to cooperate with resource-producing countries in a manner that also benefits them, so that sustainable development is carried out in compliance with the ESG standards and in consideration of the human rights of local residents and surrounding environment. In light of this situation, Japan has been strengthening dialogue with resource-rich countries and supporting their efforts to strengthen and diversify the supply chain of important minerals, and has been strengthening collaboration with like-minded countries and international organizations. Now, today's seminar, in the first part, sitting next to me, we have Ms. Elizabeth Press, Director of Planning and Program Support of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA, and Mr. Ichiro Kutani, Senior Research Director, Manager, Global Energy Group, and Director, Energy Security Unit, the Institute of Energy Economic of Japan, IEEJ, to deliver keynote speeches on the importance of key minerals in energy transition and necessary measures to diversify and strengthen supply chains. We have a second part, the roundtable. Government officials from Indonesia, Thai, the US will join in the roundtable to discuss international cooperation to overcome challenges from the perspectives of consumer countries, resource-rich countries, international organizations, and research institutions. I look forward to a fruitful discussion and a deeper understanding of the important mineral resources that are indispensable for the energy transition. I look forward to for your cooperation today. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much. Let us now move on to part one, keynote presentation. Experts, as introduced, will talk about the reasons behind the increased attention to critical minerals in the past years and the need for stable supply. As first speaker, we have Ms. Elizabeth Press, Director of Planning and Program Support in the Executive Office of the International Renewable Energy Agency, IRENA. Director Press has worked at IRENA since it was founded in 2011 after many years at the United Nations. She is currently engaged in IRENA program and strategy planning, as well as leading the geopolitics of energy transition projects and other projects. She has recently authored IRENA's report, Geopolitics of the Energy Transition, Critical Materials, published last year. Once again, thank you very much for coming to Japan. Director Press will be speaking on the leadership between clean energy transition and critical minerals and the current demand and supply situation. Over to you, Director Press.
The floor is yours. Thank you very much. Okay.
Yeah, that's fine. All right. Oh, this is better. Thank you. Thank you very much. And first of all, thank you for having me here in Tokyo. And it's a real pleasure to contribute to this conversation. And also especially working with Japan that has been demonstrating leadership in this area. And we have a long relationship in working on materials and beyond. What I'm going to do today, I'm just going to talk you through the general sort of trend of what's happening around these critical materials and kind of pinpoint to some of the areas where we see potential priority areas for the coming years and make a few recommendations. So do I sweep my slides or do you guys do it? Okay, great. I'm not going to spend much time on this, but assuming that not everybody is a deep technical expert on what we're going to be talking about today, I'm gonna go through this very quickly. As mentioned in the opening remarks, the energy transition traditionally was not really a big user of materials, but now with the shift to a renewables-based system and electrification of end-use sectors, we certainly see a huge shift in the requirements for many materials, metals and materials. Next slide, please. Now, we often talk about critical materials, like we all understand what it is. So what we did, we looked through 35 lists that we could find that certain regions or countries maintain, and this is what we saw. We saw that there's about 51 materials that somebody has on the list as a critical, and the criticality is defined based on geopolitical, geoeconomic, technical reasons, whatever the local reasons might be, and it's quite dynamic. It changes from one year to the next, and depends on the priorities. So what was also interesting, as being a global institution, we work with about 170 countries, and what we see that what many countries on OECD setting call critical materials, many countries in Africa call it strategic materials, because for them the notion of criticality is not that relevant, but the strategic element which can contribute to development and economic goals is a lot more pronounced. Next slide, please. Now we're also looking to see how do we see what's going to happen in the market in the coming 10 years or so, and we reviewed many of the forecasts because there's so many different assumptions and predictions for the next few years. So we tried to see where we all converge on where the market will be scarce in a few years to come. And we're maintaining this, what we call the scarcity ratio on materials by monitoring the trends and estimates. And you can see the higher the scarcity ratio, the bigger problem in the coming years. So lithium is definitely one that comes out quite prominently. I think that's quite well known. But then we have disposal. We also have but you still look at cobalt estimates go from 25% to 63%. So there is quite a lot of dynamism in this area that really requires careful watching. Next slide, please. Now we also try to see what is the current situation. As mentioned in the beginning, and the reason why we're talking about the criticality is really the high concentration in mining and processing of materials. And the problem is not with reserves. The problem is not with potential of mining. The problem is that we are having this spike in demand and very limited flow of supply side of these materials and the concentration. Can I have a next slide, please? So it's okay. Next slide, please. Yeah. Sorry, no, the one before. Yes, there were two slides there. There's one for forecast for. Never mind. Just go back to the map. Just go back to the map. It's okay, because the full cycle. There's two slides on that. One is the forecast for mining and refining, and there we go. This is 2030 exactly. So I mean, this is a very important slide because if you recall in the previous slide, there were a few dots, and we see a little bit more of expansion. But generally, we do not see between now and 2030 a huge difference in this in diversification of this concentration, because the mining, opening new mines and diversifying that element is actually not that simple. It takes time, and there is about 25 companies that have the capability to do it at scale. And so what we observe is that between now and 2030, there will be some expansion of the existing locations to get a higher volumes. But in terms of geographical diversification, opening new sites, it's going to be a little bit longer than 2030. So this is something for policymakers to think about, because the market will be tight for certain elements, and we will still remain locked in some ways in the current situation. Next slide, please. All right, great. So I was actually asking for this slide to be immediately after, because it's very logical. It flows well from the previous slide. It's really to show the bilateral, the export-import dynamics right now. And first of all, there's very few countries that do this at scale. And secondly, the export and import dynamics are also quite complicated, if you wish. So you can see that, for instance, on the importing side, oftentimes China is singled out as a country that has a dominance in this space, but at the same time they also have a huge dependency on imports because the concentration of processing is in China, with the exception of a couple of other materials. The other thing just to point out is that the volumes of this trade, they're very small. And this is another problem because the market is not that transparent. And to date, it was largely bilateral trade and commodity trading behind the scenes. I was actually quite shocked when we worked on this report. I was quite shocked to discover that lithium started to be traded on the London Market Exchange in 2021. So this is all coming on stream quickly and at many different angles. And it's very important to increase the transparency of information to understand, to bring a greater understanding. Next slide, please. The one before, the one on the batteries, because it's very, very important. One. Okay, so no, you can stay there. It's okay. Stay on the other one, on the one on the differences. That one. Great. Okay, great. So again, it's really important for policy making to differentiate between what oftentimes we say, like, oh, we're replacing one dependency for another. And it's important to understand that we are not replacing one dependency for another. We actually have to look at it in its own context and understand what the risks are and create policies that correspond to the risk. So, I mean, I'm not going to go line by line by this, but I want to just focus for our conversation today is that oftentimes we talk about energy security risk that comes from critical materials. It's a little bit more nuanced. Technologies are super important, and the energy transition requires a flow of materials that will enable us to have technology at scale. But in the current understanding of energy security, when we're looking at affordable uninterrupted supply, materials are really one step removed. So for policy making, it's important to actually think about these, not to transpose the thinking of fossil fuels into critical materials, but to think on their own merit or in their own context what it means. And oftentimes we talk about the supply chains of critical materials. We really tried, when we were working on this report, we tried to do some mapping to understand how these supply chains work, and we couldn't really pass the processing, because it's not a supply chain, it's a web. They go to so many different bits into different parts of manufacturing in different locations. Sometimes you cannot really trace it properly. So all these issues will need to be tackled as we go forward to bring a greater transparency and understanding to a market, but also to understand the potential risks in the long term as we shift towards more electrified energy system. Next slide, please. So what we see in type of a flow that this material conversation will evolve is really that we're going to start with the physical constraint that we are facing today, overlapping with disruptive innovation, which is already happening. And this is very important to watch, because the disruptive innovation will influence both the demand side of what it requires, but also how the markets evolve. And then the circular economy. In our estimate, in our assessment, the circular economy will probably be a little bit down the road, the serious impacts on material supply by the time that life cycle of some of the assets come to an end, and the ability to recover some of these materials at scale will really not happen immediately. It is something that is going to make a difference to the market in probably a decade or so. Next slide, please. And I want to talk to you about the disruptive innovation here a little bit, just to show you a very clear example of EV battery, because obviously it's a big part of demand that comes from that space. And this shows the mix, the chemical mix in batteries in the last 7 years, actually from 2015 to 2022, how much it changed. And it really it's fascinating. It's very interesting, and it's amazing to see how we basically moved away from cobalt, nickel into more like lithium dominated space, and we understand the reasons for it. Part of it is really the innovation, because we know no private sector company wants to be dependent on anything that might affect the bottom line. But part of it is also deliberate decision, because China deliberately moved to lithium-based batteries and really shifted the market. And I was talking to my colleague from the Institute of Energy and Economics just before this meeting, just looking at the build your dreams. BYD, the Chinese company, they just invested 1.3 trillion into a new company that will produce sodium-ion batteries for electric mobility for EV batteries. And it's going to be interesting to watch how that shift starts moving the demand side of the batteries. So it's a very dynamic space in the context of innovation, and it is something, as we discussed today, that is part of the strategy of mineral and material security as we go forward, because the alternatives are plenty, and technology is moving, so we can really consider that as one of the essential pillars of a strategy for security, material security. Next slide, please. Okay, so a little bit of a conversation around what this means for mineral-rich countries, and we know there is a lot of conversation around the opportunities this presents, and there are many countries who are considering how they can position themselves and benefit from this boom in the demand. And it is really important that we have a conversation that looks at how to bring local value to these countries as part of the economic and development strategy, but also not to stop talking about it just at the processing level, because right now the conversations are largely concentrated around the mining and processing. There is an entire value chain that comes after that, and here we're just showing what it means for electric mobility, electric vehicles. Excuse me. That is expected to be a huge market by in the next decade or so, and we often talk about this also in the context of what this means for developed economies and what they need to fulfill their energy transition needs. But we also need to start having a conversation how we advance the energy transition and some of these technologies deployment in developing countries. And you mentioned in the beginning the decision of COP28 and the push for tripling of renewables. And we know what the consequences of that are. We cannot do it if we do it just in pockets of countries. This has to happen around the world. So as we discussed today, I think it would be really good to talk about local value creation beyond just mining and processing, but looking also into manufacturing, because the manufacturing diversification is also part of the larger energy security of a future conversation that also can both create new markets and also diversify and make supply chains more resilient for all of us. Next slide, please. An important discussion is obviously around the ESG, the environmental, social, and governance aspects. I took one slide here just around the labor, which is an indicative of what we see in artisanal small-scale mining in terms of how many people work there. These are not simple issues to solve. They're very complicated. They go around the labor rights, through environmental impact, through local content creation, through rights of the indigenous communities. Just think that 54% of reserves are located in indigenous land, on indigenous land. So how we advance this, how we move with critical materials will really matter. It will matter to people who live in these areas. So there is a lot going on in terms of initiatives, but they're largely voluntary. They don't have a global coverage, and the UN is now starting to look a little bit deeper into this and convening this panel that both Japan and ourselves are being members of. So hopefully we're going to be able to move in a voluntary way to begin with, but more comprehensively going forward. Next slide, please. I don't want to go through every single recommendation because you also have a printout, but I want to highlight a couple of those. The first one is that around how do we look at the critical material demand. there are other sectors that the primary uses of critical materials, and that's been the case in the past. It's a health sector, it's defense, it's airspace. There's other areas where we see this use. We also see the use of some of the materials like platinum, for instance, in the internal combustion engines. So as we decarbonize and shift some of these sectoral boundaries, on the one hand, there's going to be an increase of material demand. On the other, there's going to be surplus because some of the technologies will be phased out as we advance on decarbonization. So it's really important for governments to assess their needs, to understand what is it that they really require, and help avoid the sector competition. This is not really very well done in many countries because normally we all work in silos. So it's one thing that I wanted to highlight for us for today. And then the second thing that I wanted to highlight over the recommendation is that we can find many solutions through technologies. And the one that we really should focus on is also how research and innovation can help us find alternatives, improve efficiency, reduce demand, and focus also on that side while we are focusing on diversification and resilience of supply chains as we look to geographically spread them more reasonably around the world. And for that, international cooperation will be absolutely key. And it's a pleasure to be here to actually delve deeper into this discussion because regional conversations will be incredibly important to these strategies. Thank you so very much.
プレス局長どうもありがとうございました。限られた時間で重要な
Thank
ポ
you
イ
very
ン
much,
トが
Ms.
全てできま
Press.
した。大
With
変
a
包括
limited
的
amount
な
of
ご
time,
説明をいただき
you
まして、
covered
どうもあ
all the
りがと
necessary
うござい
important
ます。
information.
それ
Thank you
で
very
は
much for the
早速です
comprehensive
けれども続きまし
presentation.
て、
Next,
次の基調講演
we will
に
now
移り
hear
ます。
the
一
next
般財団
keynote
法人日本エネルギー
from
経済
a
研究所
Mr.
の
Kutani,
福
the
谷
Senior
理事
Research
を研
Director
究
at the
理事に
Institute
お
of
話
Energy
をいただ
Economics
きます。
Japan, IEJ.
福谷研究理事は資源エネル資源
Mr.
農業エ
Kutani
ネ
has
ルギ
been
ー安
at
全保障委員会の担当
IEEJ
兼
since
国際情
2007,
勢分析第一グループマネージャーを
and
務め
he's a
られ
manager of
ておら
Global
れます。
Energy Group 1 and Director of
福谷
Energy
研究
Security
理事は
Unit.
2007年から日本エネル
And
ギー
since
経済研
2007,
究所
he's
におい
at
てエネ
IEEJ
ルギー安全保障政
and has
策およ
conducted
び
research
アジアを中
as
心
an
とした
expert in
地
energy
域情勢
security
をご専
policy
門
and
とし
regional
て
situations,
知られ
focusing
ご
on
ざいます。
Asia.
特に最近では重要
Recently,
鉱物の安定
he
供
has
給に
been
向けた課
making
題と
proposals
必要な
regarding
対策に
challenges
つい
for
て
a stable
提
supply
言を
of critical
行われ
minerals
ておられ
and
ます。
necessary
本
measures.
日は重要鉱物のサプライチェーンにおけ
Today,
るリスク
he
と
will
それ
give
に対する
explanations
取り
about
組みに
risks
ついてご
relating to
説明
critical
を
mineral
い
supply
ただきま
chains
す。
and
それ
initiatives
で
to
は
address
福
them.
谷研究理事
Mr.
よ
Kutani,
ろしくお願いい
the
た
floor
し
is
ます。
yours. Thank you very much for the introduction. I am Kutani from IEEJ. Well, thank you very much for giving this opportunity and very much appreciate it.
私の方からはですね、これまでプレス局長がお話しされたこと
So,
を一部ちょっと
following
しますけ
a
ども、
Ms.
鉱物
Press,
に関する
I'd like to
私
talk
ども
about
の考え方をですね、
our idea about the critical minerals. There will be
ぜひ
some
お願いし
overlap
ます。
from what Ms. Press just
はい、
mentioned.
これはすでにご紹介されてますし、皆様ご
So
存知
this
だ
is
と思います
already
けども、
covered,
重要
and
鉱物
I'm
に
sure
ついて
many
で
of
すね、
you are
資
aware
源
of
の
it.
埋
But
蔵そのもの
for
に
the
加え
mineral
まし
criticals,
て、精錬のプロ
in
セスに
addition
お
to
いても
the
ですね、
scarcity or the reserve or
収穫する
production,
ということが行われ
refining
ており、
is
これ
also
が
the
ゆえにです
area where we
ね、
see
供給リスクが
concentration
懸念され
to
ているという
specific
ところで
countries.
す。
So the
次お願
supply
いしま
risk
す。
is what we are concerned about.
こちらはですね、私どもが2023年
In
のアウトルックで
2023,
発表したも
we
のでし
published a
て、
outlook, and
エ
this
ネルギー
information
の
was
需要見
covered
通
in the
しを
report.
踏まえまして、
Based on
どれ
the
ぐらいですね、将
demand
来重要
forecast,
鉱物の需要があるのか、
this is
資
about
源
what will be
量
the
は十
future
分にあるの
demand.
かと
Do
い
we
うこと
have
を分
sufficient
析したものになります。
resource?
ニッケルとリチウムについて分
Nickel
析をしており
and
ます。
lithium are analyzed,
私どもの見
and the
通しで
results
は
is
です
shown on
ね、
this slide.
2つのシ
Our
ナリオを使
forecast.
っています。
We use
1
two
つ目がリファ
scenarios.
レンスシナリ
One
オ、
is reference
現状
scenario,
の政策をベースにしたもの。
so based on the
で、も
current
う一つがで
policy.
すね、
The other
将来の脱
is
炭素に向けた動きがより加速することを想定した技術進展シナリオです。
advanced technology scenario
ニ
with
ッケルの方で
assumption
ご説
that
明
the
をしますと、
decarbonization
青い線が
policy
リファレ
will
ンス、
promote. Blue
赤
line
色の
is the
線が
reference
技術
scenario
進展シ
line,
ナリオというふう
and
に
the
なり
red
ます。
is with the
例え
ATS,
ばニッ
advanced
ケルが
technology
ですね、
scenario.
青い
For
線、リファ
example,
レンスシナリ
nickel,
オで見ますと、
we
太い
look at
線
the
がで
blue
す
line,
ね、需
the
要を
thick
表
blue
しており
line.
ます。
This shows
需要
demand
が
under
ですね、様
reference
々な分野で
scenario.
増えていくと
in many areas or sectors, demand
で、これ
increase.
に対しまして細い
Against
線が
that,
サプラ
if you
イ、
look
供
at
給 に
the
なりま
thinner
す。
line
で、
that
見
is
ていただ
about
きますと、
supply,
需要と供
you
給
can
がほぼ
see
一致してい
that
る
the
とい
demand
う
and
こと
supply
で、
is
リ
almost
ファレ
in
ンスとし
line.
たのであればですね、
So
ニ
in
ッケル
case of
の
reference
リチウムは
scenario,
おそらくバランス
Nickel's
し、十分な
demand and
供給がされ
supply
ると
will
い
be
う
in
ことを
line
想
and
定していま
sufficient
す。
supply will
で、
be
一
there.
方、より
On
脱
the
炭
other
素に向け
hand,
た動きが加速するという
under
シナリ
the
オでは、
advanced
当然、
technology
クリーンエネル
scenario,
ギー、クリーン技
of
術に向け
course,
たミネ
toward
ラルの
clean
需要が増
energy,
えていくと
there will be
いうふうに
increased
なります。そのため、リ
demand
ファレン
for
スより
mineral.
も大きな需要
And
を
so
想
there will
定
be
していま
greater
す。
demand expected
で、一
against
方、
the reference
赤色の
scenario.
ですね、細い線見てい
If
た
you
だき
look
ま
at
すと、
the thinner red line
2035年前後から下側
from
に
around
増えていくというこ
2035,
とがわか
it
ると思い
goes
ます。
downward,
こ
as
こ
you can
で
see.
需給のギャップが
So
始ま
there's a
っている、
gap
開いている
starting
と
between
いう
demand and
ことを示
supply.
しています。で、すなわち、現在の技術、あるい
So
は、
with
将来、
current
想定され
technology
る需要、そういったも
or
のを踏まえ
assumed
ますと、
demand,
2035年前後以
based
降
on
にです
that,
ね、
from
ニッ
around
ケルの不
after
足が発生する可
2035,
能
there
性
will
があると
shortage, there
い
will
う
be
ことを示
possibility
し
of
て
the
います。
shortage of nickel.
で、右側の棒グラフはですね、
If
資
you look
源
at the
量
bar
の供
chart on the
給を
right-hand
表してい
side,
ます。
this is about the
上側がです
resource
ね、
amount.
供給で
Upper
ありま
part,
す。
that's about supply.
今、地面にあるんですけども、この先生産されるであ
So
ろう量、それ
the
からリサ
expected
イクル
production
で供
volume
給される量、これを
plus
加
supply
味
from
しています。
recycling.
下側の棒グラフがです
And
ね、
the lower
2050
bar
年までの累
is
積の需
the
要です。
accumulated demand
で、比
up
較し
until
ますと、
2050. If you
2050年までの
compare,
累積の需要の方が
the
資
demand,
源量よりも
cumulative
多いと
demand is
いう
larger
こと
than
がわかり
reserves
ます。
plus supply from
で、これは
recycling,
ですね、現在の資源の評価、それか
meaning
ら計画されている増産の見込み、こういったものを踏まえるとです
inclusive
ね、
of
資
current
源量その
estimate
もの
about the
が
reserve and the
2050年かけて不
production
足する可
plan,
能性があると
the
いうことを
supply
示しています。
may become
で、同じよう
shorter
な分
than
析をリ
the
チウムに
supply.
ついて行い
The
ま
supply
す
may
と、
become
下の
shorter
方
than
になり
demand.
ます。
And a similar
で、こちらの場合で
analysis
す
is
と、
done for
リ
lithium
ファレン
in
スの
lower
場合で
part.
もですね、
In case of
需給が
reference, even
2045年以降にギ
after
ャップが開いて
2045, there will
タ
be
イトに
gap
なる可
between
能性
demand
が
and
あると。
supply. So there's a
で、
possibility
よ
of
り気候
demand
変
and
動
supply
対策
situation
が
becoming
進む、
heightened
技術進展した例に
under
おい
the
てはですね、
ATS.
2030年前後にもリチ
From
ウム
around
が不足して
2030,
くる可能性がある
there is
というこ
possibility
とを
that
示しています。
lithium will
次
become
お願いします。
there'll be shortage for the
で、
lithium.
私どもですね、こういった
Next slide.
需給の見通し、
So
それから資源量の評
forecast
価を
for
です
the
ね、
demand
さ
and
まざまな
supply
鉱
and
物
the
について
reserve
行いました。その一
assessment
覧がこちら
were
にな
done
りま
for
す。
different materials.
で、
And
横
this
軸がで
shows
す
the
ね、
results.
2050年までの
Horizontal
どのタイ
axis
ミングで
is
需給の
the
ギャップ
timing
が開いてくる
of
か。
tight supply demand
で、縦軸が
balance.
ですね、
And the
累積の需要が、
vertical
資源量を
axis
上回る
shows
可能性があるの
the
かどうか、上
possibility
に行けば
of
資
the
源量が
cumulative
不足す
demand
るということを示
going
しています。
beyond reserve
その
plus
ためですね、
recycled supply.
左上に行くほ
So
どリスクが高く、
if you go
右上にあ
left
るほど
top,
リスク
risk
が
is
小
high.
さいという評
And
価になりま
if
す。
you go right and
で、現
below,
時点の
then
資源
risk
の
is
評価、
smaller.
それから開発の
So
見通
current
し、あるいは
reserve
需要の
assessment
想
and
定、こうい
development
ったものを
forecasts
踏
and
まえ
the
ます
demand
と、コバ
forecast
ル
based
ト、
on
あるいはニ
those
ッケル、リチウム、こうい
cobalt,
ったもの
nickel,
のリス
lithium,
クが比較
for
的
those
高いということがわ
materials,
かり
we
ます。
see relatively higher
こうした
risks.
ですね、さまざまな鉱物のリスクをですね、今後も
So
定期
those
的に
risks
見直して、どの鉱
need to
物が
be
実際
reviewed
にどの程
periodically
度
to
リスクがあ
see
るのか、需給が体
what
力
are
す
the
る可能
risk
性がある
level
のか
for
という
what
ことを適切に
materials
評価し
and
ていく
what are
必要
the
があると
likelihood
いう
of
ふうに
the
考えています。
balance becoming
次お願いし
tightened.
ます。
And we have to do it. And next
で、
slide,
こちら
please.
がですね、日本の
So
重
this
要
is
鉱
with
物の
regards to
供給を示
the
していま
supply
す。
for
左から
Japan's
です
critical
ね、リ
mineral.
チウ
From
ム、
left,
ニッケ
we
ル、
see
グラフ
lithium,
ァイト、
nickel,
レアアースという
graphite,
ふうになっ
rare
ています。
earth.
で、赤い部分がですね、中
Red
国からの
portion
供給になってい
is
き
supply
ま
from
す。
China.
ご覧になっていただければ分かる通りですね、
As you
中
can
国への依
see,
存が非常に多い
there's
と
a high
いうふうになりま
dependency
す。
on China.
で、一方、ニッケルについては
On the
で
other
す
hand,
ね、
when it comes to
インドネ
nickel,
シア、あるいはフィリピン等です
Indonesia,
が、東南アジア
Philippines,
の国からも多
and
く
those
供
South
給
Asian
があると
countries
いうこと
are
が分かると思い
big
ます。
important import
こういった
partners
す
for
べての
Japan.
国がですね、 自由に貿易供給を行い、安定
When
的
there
に
is
です
a
ね、
free
活
trade
用ができるということであれば大きな問
and
題にならないんです
if
け
we
ど
can
も、
rely
必
on
ずしもそうではない
stable
だろうと
supply,
いうことで、
then
現在
there should be
様々な
no
リスク
problem.
に関する
But
議論
we
がさ
have
れ
to
ています。
consider the risks, and so that
次お
there
願いし
are
ます。
risk discussion happening at this moment.
日本ではですね、この重要鉱物の問
In
題、実は
Japan,
2010年
in
に起
2010,
こりました。
we did
レアア
face
ース
the
の
issue
供
with
給
the
をめぐる問題であり
critical
ます。
mineral that was in
で、
relation to
当時、
supply of rare
領
earth.
有権、あとですね、尖閣諸島の、
That was with regards to
めぐる問題でですね、
the
中国か
issue
らレアアー
regarding
スの供給がです
Senkaku
ね、一時
Islands.
的に停止すると
temporarily, there was a stopping of the supply of the rare earth from China. It did happen. And at the time, 80% of the supply for the rare earth was from China. But from that point, the industry of Japan was affected a lot because of that incident. And reflecting on that, Japan took many measures, which is shown on the left-hand side. Development of a new material or the development of the technology for usage. With those measures, reliance on China was lowered successfully. But the progress stalled after a few years, and still we are reliant on China, Chinese import for about 60%. Because the rare earth is primarily in China in terms of economic supply. And that is the reason why there is a limit to what can be done. So currently, there's a lot of discussion with regards to critical material, but this does not apply only to Japan, but the other countries are also having discussion over critical material. Toward decarbonization, clean energy demand and the critical material demand are to go up. So US and the EU also are having discussion over critical material related securities. And so many countries share a interest. So the collaboration is now intensified. And I do believe that this meeting today is also in line with that objective. At the G7, it was agreed that the countries will work together, and the agreement was reflected on the declaration. And with the like-minded countries being in collaboration, it is important that we are to reduce risk related to critical material. Next slide, please. Now, this is the last slide of mine. This is a brief policy actions. Many of them are pretty much similar or same with what Ms. Press have explained. So first of all, the trade of the critical material needs to be assured. So restrictive measures need to be avoided or excluded, and also sustainable trade is needed. And for the short-term supply risk, the stockpile would be important as countermeasure. If we have stockpile, then we'll be able to manage a certain level of the supply risk. Another three, these are to do with technology development. So one way is to reduce critical material demand, and also the other is to increase the supply. They will take time, but we need to work on them in persistent manner. First, with regards to recycle, please take a look at the left bottom table. This is the analysis result done by METI in 2021. For lithium and nickel, how much consumption is done and how are they recycled? That's what being shown on this table. For example, in case of lithium, in 1 year, 76.5 tons are used for final product as input. Out of that, the collected amount is 246 tons. So only less than half of the input is being collected, and 127 tons are exported out of Japan after collected. And then 108 tons are wasted out of 246 tons. And after that, only 11 tons out of 246 tons are recycled, which means only 4% are recycled. And this is a very severe situation that we are facing. Going forward, there's a high expectation toward supply from recycling, but there actually are many barriers relation trade or economic basis. So the increasing economic recycling ratio is not being done successfully so far. And second is to develop technologies to conserve and alternate minerals. On the right-hand side, there's an example about the batteries. Hydrogen, lithium, sodium, potassium, those are the elements that are easy to release electrons. They can be used for battery. And currently, nickel metal hydride or lithium are mostly used, but sodium ion battery or potassium ion batteries are also being explored. In terms of the sodium ion battery, the material can be found from seawater in large volume, so there's less unevenness in terms of where they are. And with those technology development, mitigating risk through those technology development is also important. Lastly, this is to effectively use the reserve for the supply. As explained by Ms. Press, smallness of market or the uncertainty of forecast, the investment is not being made smoothly. There is a commercial challenge as such. And how should those be overcome? That is very important issue. Thank you very much for your attention.
久谷研究理事どうもありがとうございました。
Thank you, Mr. Kutani. The demand supply gap and risk assessment were made from the expert perspective. This requires really expertise-based analysis, but you explain in a way very easy for us to understand. Thank you very much indeed for that. Now, let us move on to the roundtable discussion. In the second part, those 5 panelists will discuss from the perspective of consuming countries, resource-rich countries, international organization, and research institute. We would like to hear a discussion surrounding critical minerals, efforts to address them, and cooperation with international community. As panelists, Director Press of IRENA and Senior Research Director Kutani of IEJ are joining in this session as well. In addition to these 2 panelists, we are pleased to have 3 more panelists. First, I will introduce those who are joining in the second part. After the introduction, I would like to ask each a new added panelist to give a few minutes talk, to do 3 minutes. First, the third panelist, Director of Mineral and Coal Development, Directorate General of Mineral and Coal, Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources of Indonesia, Dr. Julian Ambassador Siddiq. Dr. Siddiq is a former head of Mineral and Coal Testing Center and has been involved in various sectors of energy, including upstream oil and gas development and power. And this year began serving as Director of Mineral and Coal Development. Dr. Siddiq, thank you very much for joining us today. Indonesia is rich in mineral resources and is one of the world leading producer of nickel, which is necessary for electric vehicle batteries. From the standpoint of a research producing country, what are your thoughts on the development of critical minerals? So, Dr. Siddiq, can I have a few words?
Thank you, Nishimura-san. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It is an honor to me to join all the panelists here and hope that I can contribute to this discussion. On behalf of Indonesian government, I would like to thank you to MOFA for inviting us for this seminar, which is part of Mineral Security Partnership Working Level Meeting. It's such an excellent opportunity for Indonesia to take a part of this discussion. I believe all of us here in this room share similar understanding the importance of mineral for clean energy and other present technology. As projected by IEA, demand from mineral will expand significantly in the coming decades. As one of mineral producing country, Indonesia is aiming at advancing sustainable economic growth by strengthening the downstream industry, particularly for critical mineral. In our latest regulation, we classify 47 minerals that are critical to our strategic industries, such as renewable energy industry, energy storage, security and defense, telecommunication, transportation, and health industry. As our mineral resources are limited, we decide to develop our downstream industry and maximize their added value. We believe that value addition for raw material will be crucial to Indonesia economic growth, as will create more jobs and generate new business opportunity for people and increase our export capabilities to intermediate and end product. We underline the role of critical mineral in global effort to transition from fossil-based economic to cleaner energy system, and thus I believe international cooperation and foreign direct investment will play a big part of developing the downstream industry and producing country to accelerate the global energy transition. Thank you and looking forward to join discussion with panelists and hopefully we can have a productive one. Thank you.
シリ博士どうもありがとうございます。続いて4人目のパネリストとしまして、
Dr. Sidik, thank you very much indeed. And now, fourth panelist, Director of Mineral Resources Management Division, Ministry of Industry, Thailand. I would like to invite Dr. Kishkot Keopipat. Dr. Keopipat has been working for the Thai government since 2002 and has been in charge of recycling and industrial waste management for about 10 years. Currently, he is in charge of resource management, including securing mineral resources for industrial development. Thank you very much for joining. Thailand is beginning to focus on the production of electric vehicles, EVs. Given this situation, could you give us a few words about the supply of important minerals from the perspective of mineral-consuming countries? So, Dr. Keopipat, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you. Good morning, everyone who's attending here and also who's attending online. First of all, I would like to thank Japanese government for inviting me to be a part of this seminar, and it's my great pleasure here to be among distinguished speakers here today, and to discuss the importance of a stable supply of critical mineral for Thailand. Like you said, as a consuming countries, the importance of a stable supply of critical mineral is really important to us. This issue, I think, is important for everyone, for the global community, because of everybody is in, I call this, we are on the train of energy transition and digital transformations. And Thailand as well, as a member of global community, we also pushing hard to become a leader in electric vehicle manufacturing. And we set up an ambitious target, and we have a policy called 30 at 30. We would like to make a demand driven by setting that by 2030, the local produced vehicle in Thailand has to be at least 30% electric vehicle. So making that target, the government is offer subsidies for domestically manufacturing battery EVs and pickups, and by offering this incentive, now we attracting major companies to invest in the EV production in the countries. The policy, it actually goes beyond just vehicle. We're looking forward to build an electrical vehicle ecosystem for the whole supply chain, including battery as well. With this comprehensive EV policy, I can say that we have a strong focus on building sustainable future, not only become a manufacturing hub, but also a leader in responsible battery management. And I think that's why a reason why a reliable supply of critical mineral is so important to us, because we invite everybody to set up a factory and production facility in our country. So we want to make sure that who's coming to our country, they have a supply for their production. And since the critical mineral is so important for our future in the EV and technological development, so a reliable supply would ensure that we achieve this target, the government would achieve this ambitious goal and remain competitive. For domestic manufacturing, the plan is involved building a complete EV ecosystem, include battery productions, access to the critical minerals, so like for this domestic manufacturing push. And at the same time, for tech industry reliance, the critical minerals for Thailand is not just for the EV, it's also for the smartphones, computers, renewable energies. So that it would, the supply, the reliable supply would fit into and would help and support our government policy to achieve its target, And I would say that since we are consuming countries, we would like to think we cannot stand alone in this global competition. We have to work we have to collaborate with others. And like in ASEAN, there's so many platforms that we would like ASEANs to be destinations, investment destination for this energy transition. So that's why I think this becoming a part of this seminar is so important for Thailand, that to collaborate with other international organizations and also for ASEAN members together. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
失礼しました。清木パタ博士消費国
Thank you very much for your comment based on the perspective as a consuming country. Now, our last panelist, Mr. Scott Ticknor, is director of the Office of Environmental Quality in the Bureau of Oceans, Environment and Science. Previously, he served as Deputy Principal Officer at the U.S. Consulate Mumbai and as a Senior Advisor to the President at the Corporate Council on Africa. Director Ticknor now engages multilateral environmental diplomacy. Thank you very much for your participation today. Biden administration is making efforts to promote clean energy and EVs and is proactively working on securing a stable supply of critical minerals as well. And would you give us a word about what the U.S. is giving importance to in the efforts on critical minerals?
Sure. Thank you for that introduction, and thank you. I'll add my thanks to the government of Japan, for the Ministry of Foreign Affairs for organizing today's seminar, and to the government for bringing us here and focusing us on this really important issue, and also just the broad collaboration that we have with Japan on this and so many other issues. So I'm very honored to be here on behalf of the U.S. government to share information about what the United States is doing to diversify our supply chains of critical minerals for the clean energy transition. In response to the Biden administration's executive order on securing supply chains, the U.S. Department of State, which I am part of, launched the Minerals Security Partnership, or the MSP, in June 2022 to diversify the supply chain of critical minerals needed for a clean energy transition. So the MSP seeks to increase the supply of these critical minerals, as everyone has noted already, is really important, really essential for all of us, as well as diversify the supply, as well as in a way that strengthens and supports ESG, environmental, social governance standards, labor standards as well, and also incorporates recycling of these minerals. The MSP pillars require, as I said, that they incorporate the ESG standards and promote recycling. And in addition to this, through the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, the Inflation Reduction Act, and the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, the United States has invested billions of dollars to tackle recycling critical minerals from electronic and battery waste in an environmentally sound manner while promoting worker safety and ESG standards. These new pieces of legislation are the largest investment in clean energy infrastructure in America. The funding from them will help diversify our critical mineral supply chains and build an economy powered by clean energy and resilient to climate change. Catalyzed by the 2022 Inflation Reduction Act, or the IRA, U.S. government laboratories, U.S. states and cities, NGOs, non-governmental organizations, and academia, and businesses in the United States are developing innovative initiatives to tackle the issue of recycling critical minerals from electronics waste. Critical minerals, as others have noted, provide the building blocks for many modern technologies, including batteries, electric vehicles, wind turbines, solar panels, all these items that are essential to scale up renewable energy to the levels needed to keep our shared goal of limiting global warming to 1.5 degrees Celsius within reach. Thank you very much.
テクノ課長どうもありがとうございます。この後、い
Thank
く
you
つ
very
か
much.
テーマを絞ってですね、パネ
We
リス
would
トの
like
皆様
to
にご
ask
質問して、議論していただこうと思うん
the
ですけれど
panel
も、
to discuss
ちょうどセミ
on
ナ
a
ーの
few
今、1
topics
時間ほど経ちましたの
going
で、ここ
forward,
で、
but
10
since
分
about
程度
1
休憩
hour
を
have
挟
passed,
み
we would
たい
like
と
to
思い
take
ます。
a 10-minute
な
break
の
here.
で、今から10分の休
So we
憩
will
に入り
take
まして
a
11時
10-minute
5分に
break and we will
この
resume
後
at
のラウンドテーブルを再
11:05.
開いたします。
The next
そ
roundtable
れ
will
では、
begin
10分
at
間休憩に入
11:05.
ります。
Thank you.